Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Your Spiritual Journey. This is Dr. Bob, and this is the space and the place where we talk about things important to your soul, and we try to provide you with some tools you can use during these periods of chaos that we're experiencing right now when it comes to the environment and the wars and the political upheaval. All of that is something that we're trying to help you work with. So today's guest, I'm really excited to have on the program. I actually just recently ran into her at a psychic fair, and I'm going to put a plug in for the psychic fair because it's done quarterly at the Comfort Inn in Penn Hills on Rhode Eye Road. And there's another one coming up November 2nd. So I highly recommend that my audience, those of you here in Pittsburgh, try to get there. So I was just mentioning to Sunny Cohen, who is my guest, that I have decided to dub her a Renaissance woman. Because she is a woman of many talents, much experience and background, and there's a lot that the two of us have in common. Some things just are general, like both being Reiki masters. We both got PhDs. Hers in instructional design, mine in curriculum design, which is pretty much the same thing. We've both taught as adjunct professors. She's been to South Korea. I've spent time in South Korea. So we have an awful lot in common. And there's so many things that we can talk about, but we're going to start with Sunny's spiritual journey from childhood till now. So Sunny, if you will relate that spiritual journey for us, and then I'll ask you some questions.
Boy, it's kind of hard to summarize it. That's pretty much what I tried to narrate in my book, Growth Thru Reiki. And I guess it started out being a pretty psychic child, and trying to use those energies and abilities within my my pretty difficult family system, and then shutting those energies down as I tried to function in the real world that I felt like made a lot of demands on me as a young woman. In terms of professional success and familial success, and then coming back to be integrated into partial wholeness through a first experience with devastating illness when I got poisoned in a workplace and spent the next 5 or 10 years trying to work myself out of it, and doing a lot of learnings in terms of returning to the expressive arts, learning Reiki, making decisions about at least some beginning decisions about what I wanted to be spending my energy on. And then some of which involved starting to learn Reiki at that time, and getting reconnected to a certain extent with my psychic powers, and doing yoga and doing a whole variety of healing practices and spiritual practices that did essentially start to return me to wholeness.
Yeah.
And then I guess progressively, I guess I would say that Reiki has been, which I started doing in the late '90s. I became a master in 2011, but Reiki's been kind of my overarching spiritual practice. And so I've really had the opportunity to, I would say, reset my nervous system, and just learn a lot of different ways of taking much better care of myself, and of living a lot more happily and more sanely in the world
Yeah.
than I did when I started. Because when I started, I was, as a young person, I was really not prepared with the skills to be happy and sane in the world. I think that that's probably not something that most of us in our culture learn, and especially not in. I mean, there were a lot of wonderful things that I was equipped with in my family background, but also a lot of things I wasn't taught in my family background. A lot of things where it was just kind of sink or swim, without a lot of familial support. So I guess my spiritual journey has been trying to figure these things out in terms of being a happier person, and trying to make other people around me happier also, trying to make the world a better place and a more beautiful place.
Well, let me back you up a bit to that childhood. So were you raised in any particular faith?
My family, I was a family, my family was secular Jews. So both of my parents were the children of immigrants from Eastern Europe, and my father's parents were Orthodox Jews, and my mother's family was totally secular Jews.
Mm-hmm.
I was not raised as a Jew. I was raised as a Unitarian, if I had any religion at all, which was because when I was 6 or 7, everybody else in my school was going to church, and I begged my parents to please get us affiliated with something. And so they chose Unitarianism, which wasn't really, which we went to for a few years. I was influenced by Judaism in that I was very close, especially to my mother's parents. And so I learned a lot of cultural things from there, and we spent some holidays with my father's Orthodox parents, but
that would be different.
Well, it actually felt very comfortable because a lot of Orthodox Judaism is really home-based, and so it revolves around beautiful dinners that the grandmother makes, and it is different in that my grandmother at least was kind of a servant, and just didn't even have a chance to really sit down and enjoy the meal. She was just up and running and getting everything for everybody, but I didn't really particularly experience it as anything unusual. It was just a beautiful, peaceful time to enjoy being with family and eat delicious food. So.
And this was all in Portland, Oregon?
No, actually, so I lived in Portland, Oregon for most of my adult life, but my grandparents lived in New York City, and I spent a lot of my childhood in New Jersey, living in New York until I was 4, when we went to New Jersey, and then returning at the age of 13 to New York City again, where I had the chance to go to the High School of Music and Art and be exposed to a lot of the amazing culture in New York City. Yeah. So my family background was a bit, in terms of religion, was kind of a bit mixed and eclectic.
Okay, so you mentioned having some spiritual experiences or psychic experiences while you were younger?
Yes, when I was younger,
What kind of experiences were those?
yeah, I used to see ghosts when I was very small. Um, I was able to find things telepathically, especially from my mother. You know, she's always losing her glasses.
Okay.
So I could always find, I could always find her glasses for her. Those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And I would say I kind of shut it down probably at the age of 11 or 12.
Yeah.
But I was also, my parents' marriage was really fraught and rocky, and so I also found myself casting a lot of spells just intuitively to try to keep them together. I felt I guess you would say I was a parentified child. And so I felt very responsible for my parents' marriage. And then I finally got to a point where I just, I gave up on it and figured I didn't want to do that anymore. It was better to let them part. But it took me a long time to give up on it and give up my responsibility for it.
So did you grow up with siblings, or you an only child?
Yeah, I had a younger brother from my mother and father, and then both of them divorced and remarried. My father immediately, and so I had a half sister from my father's new marriage, and my parents both remarried. So I had step siblings for a while also. They both remarried and got divorced from those people. So
yeah, okay. Just trying to get a full picture of of your childhood here, because it is something that we seem to carry with us for many, many years.
Yes, definitely. I feel it's certainly been an influence on me.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the major issues that seems to have shaped a lot of your life has to do with disease and disability. So could you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I guess the major thing that I could talk about that the book starts out with is I found myself poisoned when from a workplace that I was working in. And it was a high-tech company, and there were a lot of neurotoxins that were there. And several other people became permanently disabled as a result of working there. They were permanent employees. I was a contractor. And so, but I was seriously affected for many, many years, and I'm still chemically sensitive. But anyway, it was this happened at a very stressful period in my life where I just finished making a film. And it was very stressful making the film in that I was doing it without much money. And fortunately, we had resources at the local PBS station, but we were in there in the middle of the night making the film, finishing up the film. And so I was going on fumes on 2 hours of sleep a night or whatever for months at a time, but finally finished, because this had been like a 6 or 7 year process for me from beginning to end, raising all the funds and so I just felt like I really had to get this film out. So and then this was simultaneous with when I was separating from my former husband, so which was very, very stressful. And so soon after the completion of the film, I went into this workplace, and so my resistance was at an all-time low. And so I became ill as a result of being exposed to what they had there, which everybody wouldn't, there were a lot of people working there who weren't affected by it, or not to the extent that I was, or the other people who became permanently disabled. But it really, as I said, it really affected me, to the point where I couldn't go out. I couldn't drive in my car or turn on the water to wash dishes without feeling affected. I had eliminate almost every food. I mean, it was what I went through was, it was very extreme.
Yeah.
And so that's when I got into Reiki, and that's when I met the naturopath and his wife, actually, who would have a very strong influence on me in terms of learning Reiki, and also this naturopath, Dr. Tony Esau, who is in Portland, Oregon. He really basically restored me to health. And I had been in the corporate world before that, first as a full-time employee, and then as a freelancer, but I was mostly earning my living in the corporate world and just not feeling inspired at all, and so I was very inspired by the healers who I met, who restored me to health. And also during this time, I returned to singing, which I hadn't done in many years, but I had always been a singer since I was a baby. And so I hadn't even realized what a hardship it was for me not being able to, to sing. But that was something I just kind of had put aside during the time I was, working in corporations, raising a family, being a family person. That was just something that I didn't do. But I returned to it and realized it was very life-giving for me. So anyway, that was the first incidence. And then, as I've been telling you, I recently learned I had cancer, and I was just diagnosed this past February, although it was kind of a year before that. I had been trying to track down a diagnosis because I had lung nodules that I had been screening, and I learned that they had grown, and so I was trying to get some kind of diagnosis for, it took me around a year to finally get the diagnosis. And then, fortunately, it was 3 kinds of stage 1 cancer, but it was stage 1 cancer.
Yeah.
So I had part of my lung removed in April. And so I've been recovering from that surgery, but fingers crossed, I am cured.
Yeah.
So I'll be, for the rest of my life, I'll be under surveillance to make sure it doesn't come back. But
Right.
anyway, that's been my recent encounter with
Yeah.
illness. So actually, although it was very scary when I thought that I had cancer, having been through what I was through earlier in terms of dealing with my environmental illness really prepared me for this.
Yeah.
And also the fact that part of my spiritual journey has involved pretty much no longer fearing death. Because when I was a child, I was terrified of death. And I've gotten to a point where I'm just kind of feeling like, well, it's the next stage, and we all go, and we go somewhere else.
Right.
And we don't know where we go. But it feels like it's probably going to be natural and not terrible. And so that has been
Yeah.
really helpful.
So you've touched on your artistic side. So I'm curious about a few things. One is this documentary film that you put together.
Uh-huh.
What was the topic, and what was your passion behind that? What was that about?
Well, the film was about auctioneering in rural America.
That sounds so far from what you've been engaged in. How did you get into that?
Well, I was just really wanting to make a film. In fact, I received, at a certain point in my life, I really felt like I needed some direction on what I should be doing in my life. And so I had a dream one night that told me that I should be a filmmaker. And so I was looking for topics that I could do as an independent filmmaker. And this just kind of came up. My husband at the time was a daycare director, and somebody came and did a fundraising auction for his daycare center, and he had just been to auction school.
Oh,
And so I
okay.
contacted the person at the auction school who was, really excited to have me possibly do a film featuring him. And I learned about a grant through the National Endowment for the Arts Folk Arts Program. And so I was able to attend the school and do a demo tape for this grant from the National Endowment for the Arts, and got a grant to start me off, because I was friends with different people in the Portland area through the Disarmament Media Network. Politics is another part of my life that I think I probably don't even get into in my book, but I've always been kind of anti-nuclear war activist. Or I certainly was when I was younger. And so I had friends that were media professionals who helped me do this demo tape. And so it was amazing that I got this grant that was enough to get started. So I traveled around the United States and did research about, different kinds of auctioneers, and wrote a bunch of grants, and finally focused on the idea that it would be good to just do something local, which would involve, a livestock auctioneering, because that was prevalent in Oregon and Washington. I decided to restrict the film to that for budgetary reasons. So, in a nutshell, that's kind of what happened. But it was truly an amazing experience having the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Yeah. So you're also a singer. Is a jazz singer? Is that right?
Yes, yeah. Most lately, that is, or when I say lately, I haven't actually done that a lot. Although since I've been in the Pittsburgh area, it looks like I'll be able to get into doing that again.
There's a strong jazz community here.
Right. That's what I'm learning. Yeah. A lot of support for jazz, a strong jazz community. I'm so excited because I've been spending a lot of time in Ecuador over the last 5 years, where there were a lot of obstacles to my doing music. So I'm excited to have the opportunity.
This brings up a couple more topics.
Okay.
One is I've gotten familiar with the jazz community here. A good friend of mine, Ronnie Weiss, is a jazz singer. And, she's been able to get a number of gigs around the area, and she writes a lot of her own songs, and so there's a plug for Ronnie. But I can talk to you about that offline here.
Okay.
All right, you threw out the word Ecuador. So talk about this whole thing of New York, Portland, Ecuador, and now you're in Pittsburgh. How did all this happen?
Well, I'd say a lot of it happened from.
And I skipped Korea.
Yes,
that was in Korea. There too. So,
right. Yeah, I mean, I would say a lot of this happened through necessity, in that I guess the New York to Portland wasn't so much necessity, just in that I went to Portland originally to go to college, and then went back for a while to go to Baltimore, which is where I met my former husband. But we were looking for a place to be besides Baltimore, and so Portland was a lovely place that we made the decision to be there. But then the moves pretty much since then have been, I got my PhD pretty late in life. I got it in 2005, and I'm 72 now. After getting the PhD, it was really hard finding a place in the United States where I could actually teach what I was interested in teaching. And so that's what brought me to Korea, actually, was it gave me the opportunity to teach exactly the kinds of things I was interested in teaching. Plus, my son was already there.
Oh, okay.
And had been telling me how much he liked it, in our weekly Skype sessions. So that was a lot. That was a lot of motivation to go. But then, since I kind of was forced into my first retirement, I would say at 65, a lot of my moves have been really financially, motivated by financial reasons, and to try to make sure not to be a homeless person, actually. Which is why I ended up spending a lot of time in Ecuador, was because I really couldn't afford to keep a regular home in the United States on the Social Security income I was getting at that point. And then after my recent illness, I found a friend invited me to come spend the end of my recovery in the Pittsburgh area, and I discovered that I loved a lot of things about Pittsburgh. It felt very, very aligned and right for me. I love the light. I love the birds, and I also found that it was a lot more affordable than a lot of other places in the United States. Mm-hmm. So people. I'm used to people joking about me and saying that I'm so itinerant or something. But in actuality, I'm really a person who hates to move. I've lived in many of my former homes for many years, but it's just I really want to stay housed.
Yeah, that's a good thing to do.
Yeah. So that's been the motivation behind a lot of my moves.
Yeah. The Pittsburgh community, there's not only a good jazz community here, there's a very well-developed spiritual community.
Yes, right,
and,
right.
A lot of people you can connect with here.
Mm-hmm.
So what was it when you said that you were able to go to Korea to teach what you wanted to teach? What was it that you wanted to teach? What were you prepared to share?
Well, I really wanted to teach. So my PhD is in computing technology and education.
Uh-huh.
But my focus was really on the use of arts on the internet, and specifically how the arts can help people learn on the internet, which isn't exactly what I taught in South Korea. I taught a lot of digital storytelling.
Okay.
I taught digital storytelling, a lot of things related actually to filmmaking, and also related to social media and social change. But I found those topics very, very, very exciting to teach. And my students were amazing and loved learning those topics. So I would say that was, there were other advantages and disadvantages about living in South Korea as an expat, but the teaching is the best teaching I ever did in my life. Yeah. So yeah, and then actually at the last university I taught at, so I actually had full-time positions at these universities. I was able not to be an adjunct, which is what
Great.
which is
Yeah.
what brought me over there. Yeah, I not tenure track, but that's what I had been hoping to accomplish through my PhD, was at least, to have more, not such marginal teaching jobs. And I did have,
Right.
full-time, relatively well-compensated jobs over there. And the second university I taught at was, I taught a lot of classes in ESL through the digital arts. So
Hmm.
ESL through popular music, or,
Yeah.
ESL through film, ESL through animation. It was very, very, such fun classes to teach.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
guess because of my love for arts, and kind of combining a lot of different kinds of things.
Yeah.
And I neglected to say, actually, that in the middle of the two universities that I taught at, I had a chance to be in India for 6 months.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
based at a yoga institute, and so I was really able to advance my spiritual practice as a result of my time in India.
Yeah. Well, itinerant sounds like it fits with you. I don't know. All
Well,
right.
I have traveled a lot recently. I have, I always did want to travel, but I also like to have a home base. I guess
Yeah.
if it's.
Yeah, that's important. So you've been in Pittsburgh now how long?
I came to stay with my friend Steffi Domike at the end of May, just this past May, and I moved into my apartment in Carnegie in early July.
Yeah. So not all that long
Not
yet.
very long at
Yeah.
all. No, I'm still figuring everything out.
Well, you'll find that uh, this area, especially of Pennsylvania, the Allegheny County area, has one of the most elderly populations in the country, other than
Uh-huh.
Florida.
Uh-huh.
And there's a reason for that. The cost of living is one.
Right. And also support for people. I've
And
been amazed at the free buses
yeah,
and access, which is what got me here,
uh-huh,
this morning, which is I tell other senior people in my family that you can just, get a ride for $5 to
yeah,
anywhere in the Pittsburgh area. It's pretty amazing.
right. Yeah, and the medical support here, the medical system is some of the best in the country.
I'm going to have to ask you for recommendations about that offline, because I still have to,
Yeah, right.
get my medical support figured out. I did do pulmonary rehab at UPMC actually when I was first here, which
Uh-huh.
helped a lot in
Right.
recovering from my surgery.
Yeah. Okay. There's so many different topics we're covering here, but you're just so rich as a as a wealth of information.
Oh, thank you.
And in thinking about your relationship with Reiki and what it has done for you, and why you felt compelled to write this book, could you talk a bit about your trip to Japan? We left Japan out.
Right,
Uh,
right.
and how that came about, and your attunement that you got there.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for asking.
Well,
Yeah.
that fascinated me.
Yeah, so my son truly could be considered more itinerant. Not exactly, but he teaches at international schools. So he had been in Japan for a number of years, and I hadn't seen him since the beginning of the pandemic. So at the close of the pandemic, let's see, around a year and a half ago, I went to visit him and his wife in Tokyo and Osaka, and I knew that Yusui, who was the progenitor of Reiki, had a gravesite of there in Tokyo. So I dragged my son and his wife Jasmine to accompany me there. And we did locate it after a little bit of doing to find it. And it was just being at the gravesite. It just felt so warm and nurturing. And even my son Jonah and his wife Jasmine felt it, because they were part of their reluctance to accompany me was because in general going to grave sites isn't what they like to do. In general, they find them really creepy.
Okay.
But even they felt like it was very very good energy at this grave site. And at a certain point, they just left me at his gravesite, to spend some time alone there. And I had a communication with Yasui where I just thanked him for bringing Reiki to the world. And I received a telepathic communication from him saying, now it's your turn. Like, get off your duff and do something. I mean, I hadn't really been feeling as though I was really holding back, but I have been doing some other things and haven't really been sure about how to bring Reiki more to the public. And I'm really grateful for some of the ideas that you just gave me before the show, Bob, of some ways in which I might share Reiki more with the public. But I think that even though it seems as though Reiki is coming much more into the mainstream in terms of being its use being adopted in hospitals and that sort of thing, it's still not. I think people still don't really know what it is or what it can do for them, there's really kind of a lack of knowledge about it. So.
Yeah. I actually had a guest a few weeks ago who had terminal cancer, stage 4, given 4 months to live, and told there's no use us doing chemo because you're too far gone. And she got a message to look into Reiki immediately, which she did self-Reiki and healed her cancer. And she's been cancer-free for a number of years now. So there are, and by the way, audience, I don't recommend that you give up on your chemo and go to Reiki. That isn't what I'm saying. I'm just saying that the power of Reiki and a message that I got similar to yours, not from Yusui, but what I saw as an attunement was that you're more powerful than you know. And that you is every single one of us. We have a lot more capability and a lot more power than we allow ourselves to tap into and to feel and to share. I didn't get into it as early as you did. I was in my 70s. I was 75 years old before I became a Reiki practitioner, and it's just this past year that I became a Reiki master. So there's also, because of the Reiki community that I'm aware of, often a sense that once we have this skill and this ability and understand it and use it for a while, that we're not sure what to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I know that many of the Reiki masters I know have had an up and down relationship with it until they have found that zone or exactly what works for them in terms of what they do with their Reiki.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and I'm very much right now in that stage of not being sure
Mm-hmm.
of what I'm doing with my Reiki practice. But it's a journey. You know?
Well, it is, and I'm gonna, I'm gonna maybe say that I think that there's some issues within Reiki, within the Reiki community, or within the context of Reiki that make Reiki a little difficult. Which is that it seems as I mean, I definitely don't feel that outsiders should be certifying Reiki because outsiders don't know what Reiki does or anything like that. And there's some kind of a movement by some health authorities to certify Reiki. But on the other hand, I think there has been a lack of accountability within Reiki, and so it hasn't been possible, even despite the fact that Reiki is being adopted more in the mainstream. It hasn't been completely adopted by the mainstream in terms of really being considered a substantial discipline because of the lack of accountability and the fact that there's some people that can go from being Reiki 1 to a master in 2 weekends.
Yeah.
There's some practices within Reiki that I don't believe in personally. I started with Reiki in 1998. I didn't become a master until 2011, and I wouldn't say that I was going full force with Reiki until 2017. I think everybody might not be as a late bloomer as I am. I mean, it might have taken me longer. I'm not saying that everybody should take that long, but I think that there needs to be and I think that I know that there are organizations within Reiki that do require there to be more rigor. And I'm not connected with all of those organizations yet, but I think for Reiki to be truly taken seriously, there needs to be more rigor universally.
Right.
So that it can really be taken seriously within the outer world, and then there will be more opportunities for people to, to have a more stable career path within it.
Yeah, the one that's the largest now internationally is the ICRT, the International Center for Reiki Training. And there's a lot of rigor there.
Oh, okay.
And that's the organization that puts out the Reiki News magazine.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I highly recommend them.
I also know. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't want to interrupt you. Well, also I know medical Reiki. And I'm spacing out on the name of the person who originated that, who's passed away recently, but I know that there's a lot of rigor within people becoming certified medical practitioners, which is something that I've actually thought about doing.
Yeah.
But I think it's important for people to be able to get certifications within the Reiki community that are meaningful and mean something to the outside world.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, all of us are kind of laboring under the fact that it's not, that some Reiki is very powerful. I've had treatments from people that did nothing for me, and so I think that's important.
Yeah. No, for sure. Now, in your book, you talk very little bit that you're able to communicate with animals,
Uh-huh.
and I assume that's telepathically.
Yes. Uh-huh. Well, but also with hands-on healing with animals.
Okay.
I've, and it's funny for me, I found that a lot of my abilities with Reiki just kind of have snuck up on me. Like all of a sudden I discovered that there's something I can do that I didn't used to be able to do.
Yeah.
And that's not, but anyway, yeah, but I do give, sessions to animals sometimes. And I have noticed within the last year or so that I have been able to telepathically communicate with animals, or that animals seem to be very drawn to me.
Uh-huh.
And yeah.
Well, telepathy is something that interests me in that prior to language developing, that as humans, we had to develop a form of communication
Mm-hmm.
as hunter-gatherers and just creating a culture. And that I guess the theory is that we used to only communicate telepathically with each other.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we developed our culture. That's how we developed as humans and evolved. There have been discovered just a couple cultures that have been cut off from the rest of the world where they still communicate telepathically. And
only telepathically.
only telepathically.
Wow, they don't use smoke signals or anything
No.
like that. No.
Although it's funny you bring up smoke signals, because I was recently reading that the whole concept of smoke signals was to let someone else know, or another tribe, that a telepathic communication was about to be started.
Wow, isn't
So
that
this
amazing?
was for them to prepare themselves to
Oh, to
receive
receive
that
that.
communication
Oh, that's really
over long
fascinating.
distances.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
fascinating, because that reminds me of when I do my distance Reiki. I always try to check in with a person, by phone, or some type of email message or something like that, just to check in with them, and prepare them for the fact that I'm going to start sending. But
Right.
when I send, which is, I guess, different people have different ways of doing distance. I don't. I send my distance Reiki telepathically. I don't do it over the phone. I don't do it via
Right.
computer. I just basically, lie there and connect with them in the ethers, and that's what I do. I'm sorry for interrupting you, but that just
No,
occurred to me. That seemed
yeah.
like a similar kind of process. Yeah.
Yeah, my I guess best experience with distance Reiki was the person knowing that it was coming,
Mm-hmm.
having a bear that I, located their chakras on and
Oh,
worked with
wow.
them,
Uh-huh.
and then finding out that they felt exactly what I was sending to the places where I was sending it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was confirmation for me, because sometimes you wonder when you're doing distance, you don't get an immediate response. Sometimes it's a little later,
Right.
but
Right.
this was immediate. So
Uh-huh. And
yeah.
people do respond differently
Yeah.
to
Right.
distance Reiki as to all Reiki. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I feel like I could go on and on with you for a long time. But this is the point of the show where I ask the guest to leave our audience with a few words of wisdom. You have a book full of it. It's only 56 pages, by the way, audience.
Yeah.
So
fast read.
if you want to get into a fast read that's full of good stuff, I highly recommend the book.
Thank
Uh,
you so much, Bob.
So I guess I should read the title. Okay, it's Inner Growth Thru Reiki by Sunny Cohen, and that's Sunny. And you can find that online pretty much anywhere.
Yeah, if you just, there is a link that if you go to, I have some links for it on my Linktree page, which Bob's going to make available to you. But if you just if you Google Inner
Yeah.
Growth Through Reiki and Sunny Cohen, a lot of places will pop up where you can purchase it, or you could go into your favorite brick and mortar store and special order it. But it's being distributed internationally by most of the major distributors.
So, audience, you know that on yourspiritualjourneypodcast.com, under resources, you'll be able to find a link to be able to purchase Sunny's book. So, Sunny, any words for our audience?
You know, this is kind of crazy. This just popped into my head.
Okay.
But the only thing I got was "Don't worry, be happy." in the in the
Okay.
Bobby McFerrin, the words from the Bobby McFerrin tune, which seems a little surface and sappy, but
Uh-huh.
that's the best I can do for you all.
No, I love it. Too many of us take life too seriously, and basically we're here for the joy of it.
Right.
So let's focus on the joy. Yeah. All right, audience. As always, take what resonates with you, and what doesn't resonate, put it on a shelf until you're ready to deal with it. Until next time, this has been Your Spiritual Journey.